Hi, welcome to Lean Blog Interviews. I'm your host, Mark Graban. Our guest today is John Rizzo. He has led transformational change at companies including Basin Holdings and Talos Holdings, creating billions in value across manufacturing, healthcare, retail, and nonprofit sectors, working with more than 1,000 teams at over 50 organizations. And we're going to be talking primarily about his new book that he has written with a friend of mine, Tom Ehrenfeld. And that book is titled Creating Value, Empowering People for Sustainable Success that Benefits Employees, Customers, and Owners. So, John, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for having me on.
Well, it's great to have you here. I've known Tom a long time. He was editor of most recent book. So I'm glad that you were able to work with him and that he was able to connect us. And, before we talk about the book, I like to pick people's brains and hear origin stories. How and where did you get started with Lean or TPS?
It all got started when I was at Kraus Heinz and I did a stint in sales. And our number one customer was Wiremold. And I was visiting Wiremold with the local salesperson. And we go to the floor, talk to people that were using the products that we manufactured for them. And they kind of there was some commotion going on. I was like, well, what is that? And it's like, well, that's those darn Japanese. And they said it knowing that they were helping their business, right? It was
Yeah.
challenging, but helping their business.
Right.
And that was my first exposure to Nikau and to lean. And fast forward a few years when I went from sales to plant management, I used Nikau and Bill Moffett, who I met, and Art Byrne, all helped me with my transformation at Kraus Heinz to get started.
Yeah. So had you stumbled into, or at least you were seeing something happening with the Kaizen event?
Yeah. So Art allowed me to participate in president events
Mhm.
at Wiremold, and the learning started right away. I remember one event where I created a Kanban system to be able to get material from one machine to, from assembly to assembly. And it was interesting that, I had learned how to do Kanban. I thought, oh,
Mhm.
I'm gonna nail this, right?
Mhm.
The cow came out and just stared at the machine
Uh-huh.
and stared at the assembly and walked away. And I realized that flow was the goal, not
Right.
Kanban. You put Kanban in when you can't get flow, right?
Right.
But in that case, I thought, oh, I knew how to do this. And, it was a very early lesson learned to just move the areas together and
Mhm.
do single piece flow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many lessons from Art and from Mr. Nikau.
Yeah. And you're not alone in, a situation. This happens a lot. And, I think back to slightly different situations early in my lean journey where, yeah, you're taught something and how to do it, but you might miss some of the why or the context. I mean, that's at least you learned from it. And I mean, he said nothing that just in and of itself was enough to spark you to think. I mean, that he didn't even ask a question, I guess.
I
Right.
mean, he just shook his head almost like in disgust, like, how do you not know that
Mm,
just move this together? And it's a early lesson. I mean, I thought
yeah, yeah,
Kanban was a good thing to do.
yeah,
Oh, it's a countermeasure
yeah,
when you can't get flow. And it was just an early lesson that I learned.
yeah. And I've heard a variation of what you were describing. I think the expression is, flow where you can, pull where you must.
Well said.
Pretty basic thing,
Well
but
said.
yeah, we learn by doing. And tell us more. Yeah, not everyone knows that the term president event. If you could just kind of share a little bit more context and how they had you involved as a supplier.
Yeah, so Art would allow people to participate in events if they were a supplier or if they were a senior executive. He would allow them. It was a long list of people who wanted to learn from Wiremold at the time. And so it was, a partnership for suppliers or for a way for Wiremold to share this business system with other companies, but it would have to be their senior person who would make the time and effort and then lead it at their organization. And, you know, those were my first experiences. And then, back to Kraus Heinz, I went from sales back into operations and started doing, workshops or Kaizen events. We called them at the time. And Bill Moffett was our mentor.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of the 6-inch move, which is in the book, which was really the start of my whole lean journey.
Yeah. So could you tell us that story briefly? I'm not trying to circumvent people from also reading the book,
No,
but
no, not by all means. So,
yeah.
we had equipment scattered around the plant. We did a workshop. The goal was to move it into a similar area to get flow. And we had to get a rigger to come in and move the equipment because it was so heavy. So we paid a lot of money for somebody to come in and move this equipment into this department, which we called a cell.
Uh-huh.
And the operator came in the next day and said, if you just moved this piece of equipment 6 inches, it would have been better.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking, I spent all this money.
Yeah.
No way I can do this. And Bill Moffett said to me, move that piece of equipment 6 inches.
Mhm.
And we did. And that operator said, I cannot believe they listened to me.
Yeah.
We did something. And that operator turned out to be a union steward, was very influential, and said to the rest of the union, let's give these guys a chance. I mean, that was even before, lean thinking had been written. So they had no idea where
Right.
we were going. But that one action said to them, let's give this a chance. And we went on to do an incredible transformation. And my personal lesson that I learned, the importance of being present, observing the work
Mhm.
people, and listening to people do the work. And that's guided my kind of leadership style my whole career.
Yeah. And to do that 6-inch move, did that require bringing the equipment back in, or was it more the
Yes.
barrier of like okay, it did. It wasn't just like, well, hey, we already quote unquote fixed it and no.
Yeah, I mean, I was like 6 inches, what's it matter? No, we went out and got the rigger. They came in that night at a really expensive rate to move that piece of equipment, just 6 inches.
Yeah.
But it really did make a difference in terms of how that person and that cell operated. And again, it was just the spark that ignited our journey at Kraus Heinz and my lean journey for my whole career. And, I went on to implement at another number of companies that I led, and then companies I worked with as an investor, and
Mhm.
then companies I worked with as a consultant. So I've it served me well in all of those areas.
Yeah. And that's also such a relatable, sadly common situation of, thinking of factories that I've worked in back in the day, or, walking in to a hospital department as a consultant, and that same lament of people saying nobody listens to us. And it's just it's something maybe, for just a point for reflection of, what let me turn it into a question for you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um the things that is try not to make it a leading question, but the
Oh,
things
no.
that just thinking your thoughts on, what goes wrong when a company learns the tools, even, kind of strategic level lean strategies, but misses out on that opportunity to listen to and engage the frontline staff. People might say, oh, quote unquote, we're implementing lean without that very human connection, unfortunately.
Yeah, and continuous improvement business system is a system.
Mhm.
It's not just the tools, and I think we all know that. I mean, companies who have come to me over the years, hey, we're doing lean and we're not getting the results, and I'd go in and look and say, where's your strategy deployment? Where's your
Mhm.
action analysis and your improvement plan? Where's the development of your people in terms of their problem solving skills? Where's the workshops and the report outs and the follow up, and where are the KPIs? And they'll be like, oh, well, we're just doing Kaizen events.
Mhm. Mhm.
at the system. And in that is, people development is really at the heart of that system. We need to develop our people as problem solvers, and that's how we get the results and the sustainable improvement.
Yeah. And one other thing, speaking of development, before we dig into the book, I wanted to ask about that relationship as a supplier to Wiremold. How
Mhm,
the
mhm,
classic Toyota
mhm,
style
mhm,
approach to suppliers is
mhm,
collaboration,
mhm,
not just demanding lower
mhm,
costs, but partnering, helping you.
mhm.
I'm guessing that was. Could you share more about that style of relationship, and was that different than working with other companies?
Well, sure. I mean, and I can go. I mean, certainly from Wiremold, but one of the businesses I'm currently working with, yeah, their primary, we're a supplier to Toyota.
Mhm.
It's a substantial amount of business. We've been Toyota Supplier of the Year for the last 5 years, and it's been that partnership. I mean, they work with us. I mean,
Mhm.
it's interesting that we're getting a we're getting a an award for our results, which is based on a business system, which we continue to learn from them.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, as we know, there's a lot of in today's continuous improvement business systems, there's a lot of influencers in that. And I mean, I've learned tremendously from Toyota as well as Wiremold and a number of other companies over the years.
Mhm. And I know all of those experiences have influenced and informed the book. And again,
Mhm,
congratulations on the release there. I know it's your first book. Creating Value is the
mhm,
title.
mhm,
Could you share some thoughts on defining value, either in the context of lean or in a corporate setting, and thinking about value and not just waste? I notice the title of the book is not reducing waste.
yeah.
Why creating value?
So, the alternative is value extraction. I've worked in the private equity world for a number of those years. And in some cases, we treated people as costs to be minimized, squeeze short term gains, did financial engineering, as opposed to value creation, which invests in people, builds problem solving capability, and generates sustainable success that doesn't just benefit the shareholders, which maybe the private equity world was a little bit more focused on, but also benefits the employees and the customers. And I use employees first in the title
Mhm.
of the book
Yes.
because I mean it's just my I've been an employee and that's just
Mhm.
my philosophy. I mean, I've people say, oh, the customer always comes first, all about the customer. Well, my personal philosophy, I put the employee first,
Mhm.
all my coworkers. And so when we talk about that value creation, to me, it's most important that it starts with the people who do the work and then, the customers and then the shareholders.
Yeah, and that is notable in the
Mhm,
subtitle, like you
mhm,
said,
mhm, mhm,
employees,
mhm,
customers,
mhm,
and owners. Do you run across people who think about assumed trade-offs? Like, you hear in a different context, whether it's construction or manufacturing or different settings. Was it good, fast, and cheap? Pick two out of three. Like, there's inherent trade-offs. I mean, I think we're on the same page that there are not inherent trade-offs across those three. But do you still run across people say, well, if we do things for the employees, that's going to hurt shareholder returns? If we do something good for the customer, that's maybe going to be rough on the employees? You're shaking your head no.
I mean, I definitely run across it
Yeah.
because especially in the consulting business that does quite a bit of work for in the private equity world, it's that the huge uh, pressure they're under for short term returns, short term gains. So, we get pushback more than I care to have to
Mhm.
deal with.
Mhm.
That's not the fun part of the job. But yeah, we
Right,
definitely
right.
get pushback still on it. But in the end, the people who do the work already know how to improve it.
Right.
And if you can understand that and be a humble leader
Mhm.
and allow that to take place, you get the results. So it's a lot of education working with the private equity and with the leaders that think that their job is to make those decisions, to make those improvements. And that's why they're in that position, and they don't have the humility to be able to let the people who do the work do it. And
Mhm.
so that's another area where we get resistance, but through coaching and training, sometimes we overcome it, sometimes we don't.
Right. But it seems like there's an opportunity, this book is gonna reach an audience
Yeah.
that well, let me ask, one question before the other. There's a potential to reach an audience with this book that might not pick up a book with the word lean or Toyota in the title.
Yeah.
I've got tell
Yeah.
us more about who you think the target readers are for the book and who you're trying to reach.
Well, it's interesting. I have used that terminology on this call, but I don't use the word lean in the book. I mean, it's referenced a couple of times in context of Wiremold using it or some of
Yeah.
the old companies, but I don't use the word lean. Frankly, I
Don't apologize for that.
I
You're still welcome here.
I I don't I I couldn't even define it for you, right? I did a long time ago. I couldn't
Yeah.
define that term for you today. So I use the term, continuous improvement business system or a holistic business system, which
Mhm.
again draws from a lot of thought leaders going back to Deming and Follett and Taylor. And I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of thought leaders in management that contributed to this body of work.
Yeah. So are you trying to reach CEOs, senior operations executives? I mean, there's
People, and not just in business, a lot of the stories have to do with, services and retail. So it's change agents in in any of those organizations.
Mhm.
And that's who I'm trying to get to. People who want to bring about change. And again, it's a wide variety. It's not just manufacturing, it's services, it's retail, it's municipal government. So all those areas. I'm trying to go after the change agents.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing I was going to ask
Mhm,
about employees, it seems
mhm,
like there's an opportunity to reach the readers of the book and maybe open their eyes. When employees are viewed as a cost, I think a lot of discussion even in society is about pay and benefits.
mhm,
And
mhm,
I wouldn't question that pay and benefits are important, but I think there's a lot more to it when it comes to creating a workplace that is really a great place to be beyond the pay. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit more, in terms of, the benefits to the employees, because they
mhm.
might, you're like, oh, you're going to develop me. Like, well, you want more out of me. Like, what are some examples of where, I mean, I already agree with you, but how would you make that case that no, this is better for the employees?
So the first word on the cover of the book is empowering.
Hmm.
It's the very first word, empowering people for sustainable success. And empowerment doesn't mean trying to figure out your job. That's chaos. Empowerment is being able to make changes to the standard and how the work is being done.
Hmm.
We've got to have standards. And by the way, everybody's got to follow those standards every time because we want consistent quality, productivity, service, safety. But wait a minute, I got a better way.
Yeah.
Okay. We need a way for people to understand how to work through the organization to get that better way implemented. So we change the standard. So empowerment is not figuring out your job a day. That's chaos. It's being able to make improvements to your job. That's where the employee comes in and it helps improve their satisfaction because they now are able to improve their job, to improve the processes. And that's how you get over oh, this is all about cost or getting more out of us. It's truly creating an environment where people are empowered.
Yeah. And then, I think reinforcing that being listened to and being empowered, it leads to benefits because there's an expression to me I think sounds great. I've heard it from Toyota people that and other organizations. Everybody here has two jobs: to do the work and to improve the work. And some people freak out when they hear the two jobs. Like, well, I'm too busy, or it sounds like an added burden instead of something to take interest in and get some joy or benefit out of.
That's interesting. You talk about, two parts of the job.
Yeah.
In the book, I mean, I've got a copy of it here. It's probably not gonna show up, but this is a sign I give everybody when they start, a position at a company that I'm involved with or run,
Yeah.
and it's time allocation. And the first thing is people development.
And that was in big letters
That was in big letters.
for those who are just listening. Yeah.
The the medium letters is make improvements. And the small letters in red is PowerPoint and everything else. So really your jobs are people development and make improvements are the two things that I see. And, I would 50-30, if we put percentages on them, it'd be 50% on that people development, 30 or 40% on making improvements, and then 10% everything else, PowerPoint and everything else. So that's what I kind of communicate to people when we bring them into our organizations. I mean, that is their job. I mean, it's about, do you have the right people? Have they had the training? Or do they have the resources to be successful? That people development, it's so important. And then actually making improvements ourselves.
Yeah. And that goes hand in hand. And some people there's a risk that people might hear like, oh, okay, you want me to spend more on training. We're going to increase our training budget. It's more to it than that, or different than that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're really changing a culture, and to be able to run a business that way, and it's there's a lot to do it. And yeah, we definitely get questioned on things like, that are not directly related to a return the next day. I mean, we
Yeah.
get those all the time, right? Through the workshop process and through the daily improvements that are happening. But we definitely get pushback on the costs of some of these things, because you're not able to draw a straight line between training and, that month's financials.
Sure. But, I think there's that change in mindset from managers or leaders at different levels, being the ones who need to have the answers and then tell people what to go execute, as opposed to what you're describing, this more Toyota-ish idea of getting things done through people development. What can you share an example of, a situation where it might have been faster to just tell someone what to do as opposed to, behaving in a way that also develops the people involved or developing the leaders involved?
I got many stories.
Yeah.
One that just popped into mind is we were at a company, and we were in an area, we were going to do a workshop, and this one woman said, "Not on my bench. I don't want any of that lean stuff. Not in my area.
Yeah.
I don't want it. I don't believe in it. I don't need it." And so, and then, the next area we worked and with the team, and, the person got, some new lights. They got a comfort pad to stand on. All the material was being replenished from the back to make it easy. The station was right sized. It was really quite well done by the person who was doing the work,
Mhm.
team supporting her. The other person said, "I want all of that. I want
I
all of
do
that."
want all of that.
So they said, "When can you come help me do
Yeah.
all of that?" So rather than telling this person that they needed to improve their workstation and get these things, especially the back feed, which made it much better, and line server and all of that, they had to see it,
Yeah.
right? And then that they would be able to make the change. They saw it elsewhere, and then they had the opportunity to do it. So we didn't tell them to improve their workplace organization.
Right.
They thought, then they did it, and they believed in it. So yeah, the top down kind of command and control got,
Yeah.
it's got its own issues, obviously.
No, and I've seen, especially in healthcare, the last 20 years, to me, one of the best signs that our lean efforts in an initial area are going well is when word starts to spread. People go to the cafeteria, they eat They run into friends from other departments, and when good things are happening with people instead of being done to them, I've heard those same questions of like, hey, why can't our area people are fighting to say, hey, help bring this approach to us next.
And congratulations on the work that you've done in the hospital. I think your book is one of those right over my shoulder, right there, Lean
Lean
Hospitals.
hospitals. Oh,
Uh,
really? Oh, okay. I see
and yeah,
Toyota and I see
we have
recognized.
done
Yeah.
yeah, we have done work in healthcare. I have
Mhm.
some experience, and I certainly have learned from you and your writings in that area.
Oh,
One
thanks.
thing is, people ask me, "What's the most complicated company you've worked with?" And I say, "It's healthcare. It's a hospital."
Mhm.
When you do a value stream analysis and an improvement plan, which, as you know, maps out all the processes and comes up the roadmap for improvement. When you've manufacturing something, even if it has thousands of components, it's pretty simple. You got the components coming in, metals may be fabricated, you're doing some assembly, it's shipping. It's pretty simple. The hospital, with things coming in
Yeah.
from all different directions and going all with all different directions and all the core competencies, it's just been interesting. It's that to me, that's the most complicated
Mhm.
limitations that I've dealt with. I don't know. Do you feel the same?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of complexity. There are a lot of similarities. I mean, I think any organization is built on, people and processes, and that all exists in healthcare. But some of the peculiar dynamics of, a lot of very important frontline staff or powerful independent contractors, you know, and that's even, then there's the added complexity of this is an academic medical
Mhm.
center
Mhm.
that has the dual purpose of treatment and teaching. And then there's, I mean, I think it's hard to find another industry where you have third party payers and you think about value to who, creating value for the patient. And would the customer want more of that? Like, well, the patient versus the payer,
Oh
those
my gosh.
I think they don't align, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. That's complicated. It's you and others have proven that it can work there. And, another point in the book is we have many examples of this and, working in all different industries. I mean,
Uh,
you name it, whether it's, manufacturing or services or retail or running a museum
mhm.
or, I mean, we did work with laboratory animal science with the largest hospital chain in the Northeast. It works everywhere.
Yeah. And, we can focus on the people side of things. And so, I mean, I think we can dig into that a little bit more where, this would be applicable across so many different settings as you write about the wisdom of the people doing the work is, the true source of sustainable improvement. But that doesn't mean leaders have nothing to do. Like how does the role of the leader shift? What are some of the behaviors that either unlock that wisdom or unintentionally maybe tamp it down?
First, there's humility, right? The leader has to have humility to, allow the organization to make improvements and not have the mindset that they have to be the one to make those changes. The other thing, on the leadership side is a lot of times those leaders got promoted because they were the best firefighters.
Mhm.
They keep getting promoted up the line.
Yeah.
The problem, and they go in and tell people what to do and fix it. And they're really good firefighters. It's very hard for them to change
Right.
from being that firefighter to being the person that sees the waste,
Mhm.
right? So they're the ones who see the problems, and having built a problem solving organization, allowing that organization to resolve the problems or make the improvements. So that can be very difficult for some leaders to come out of this. I'm the firefighter, I'm
Mhm.
the fixer, I've got to do it, to be a different role where when they're in the office or in the factory or in the warehouse, they're now looking for problems, or sometimes we call them waste, right? Looking for that, pointing it out, and then making sure that somebody's grabbing it and running with it and getting it improved or implemented and things in place to make sure that it's sustainable. So it's a big change for some leaders going down this journey. One of just popped into my head, when I got started at Kraus Heinz, Bill Tuck came in and said to the president, Bill Moffett came in and said to the president, when we got started, he walked around the factory and he said to him, everything is wrong at Kraus Heinz. He said, everything you do is wrong.
Everything.
And to Bill Tuck's credit, my mentor, he said, okay, show me.
Yeah.
Reach me. Okay.
Right.
As opposed to, you don't understand. Our business is different.
Right.
All the other reasons. I know
Mhm.
how to run this business. I know what to do. It's that attitude of the senior leader that's so important. If it's this won't work here, or
Right.
I know how to run this business.
Or there's the excuses of like, yeah, well, we know this is ideal, but this is the way it is. This is the way it has to be. Because I've seen pride get in the way. People in healthcare might say, like, oh, well, yeah, it's unfortunate that we have all these hospital acquired infections, but that happens. Or there's this implication, or like, well, if that was solvable, we would have solved it because we're smart and motivated. But well, we could still get at it. We just don't know how yet, maybe.
It's so hard for some people to overcome that.
Yeah.
That attitude that what you're saying is, I'm not smart enough, because if I was, I would have already done this.
Yeah. But I don't think that's what we're trying to imply at all.
Not at all.
Not
Not at all.
smart.
But people, they jump to that. They jump to that sometimes, and it can be difficult to overcome. And, fortunately for Bill Tuck, he was open to change, open to learning, and, saw the results quickly, and quickly became, the relic, the leader of the entire process for us. We're very fortunate, because we might not be having this call today if that
Yeah.
conversation had gone the other direction.
So it is difficult to change these habits. And, I was thinking back this morning to a previous guest who had been a healthcare senior executive, Kim Barnes, who wrote a book called Beyond Heroes, about the
Yeah.
name for, like, let's create systems where we don't need everyday heroic behaviors. And sadly just learned that she passed away. Um, so just kind of want to give a minute for those who are listening who knew Kim, to think about her and her family. But
Mhm.
she contributed so much in this area. And I think part of the habit is an organizational habit of senior executives rewarding the firefighters, like you said, through promotions, bonuses, pats on the back, what have you. In your experience, so what's the role of a CEO? I wasn't there with Art Byrne. Does the
Mhm.
CEO, like Art Byrne, kind of consciously, shift their tone and say, okay, it's great you put the fire out, but we can't have more fires, and really and reward. It's hard to reward people for the fires that don't start, right?
Yeah, certainly the CEO is responsible for creating the vision, communicating the vision. That's very important. And then deploying the strategy of the business. We use Hoshin, don't want to get hung up on words, but
Yeah.
process where the strategy of the business can be deployed throughout the organization. So that's another role as CEO. And then it's creating the sense of urgency this is hard work, and change is hard. And for people to be able to be open to embrace change, maybe a sense of urgency can help that process along. Also, it's, their responsibility to bring in the right leaders, and to lead the process and develop them accordingly and hold them accountable. So all the roles of the CEO. I miss anything?
Well, no, I think it. I think generally
Mhm.
things travel downhill, and this question of humility. The systems and organizations may ignore the more humble leaders that don't toot their own horn, who don't claim credit for things. Organizations also maybe tend to promote and reward those that are less humble. It seems like that's something hopefully leaders already embrace
Mhm.
in terms of demonstrating humility, trying to reward it, like rewarding somebody for saying, I don't know, let's figure it out, as opposed to getting punished for not knowing.
Sure.
I'm,
Sure.
I'm part of this culture, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How can we help develop that? I mean, well, maybe ask it a different way. I mean,
Yeah.
if a senior executive is not humble, it's not like we can send them to a humility workshop.
One of the things that I learned from Art Byrne, he would allow a CEO of another company to come in and participate in an event,
Mhm.
right? It would have to be the CEO though. I mean, a lot of people were down the line and they could come to Wiremold and be like, "Oh, this is fantastic." And
Yeah,
if the boss didn't believe it, it's just creating frustration.
yeah,
And, I've utilized that, the stint I did in consulting, sometimes we would have companies that would come to us and maybe they were pushed toward us a little bit by the private equity ownership.
mhm,
I was like, I don't know. I would bring the CEO to another company because you're not gonna convince them in a PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, right. But getting them to another company with a CEO to CEO conversation, even
mhm,
and
mhm.
ideally participating in a workshop, but it could just be a walk around the floor, pull the organization so I found that the most useful way to get that CEO who doesn't get it to
Mhm.
maybe have that light bulb
Yeah,
turn on and become that, because you're just not going to do it other way. You're not going to go in there and go, blah, blah, blah. Here's my PowerPoint, blah, blah,
right,
blah.
right.
This is what people have done in the past. I mean, there's a lot of documentation on this process and success stories, but getting them to appear and seeing it, that's been the most successful that I found to
Yeah.
get that light bulb on.
Yeah, and eye-opening and hopefully humbling in what I think is I think the most correct use of the term. I mean, Nikao staring at your Kanban situation in the moment was probably humbling, but you chose to learn from it. Some people might just get upset and say, "Well, that guy's a jerk." But going to a factory where you might see, "Oh, okay, there are places a lot operating at a much higher level than we are." Like I think of a friend and a former podcast guest here, Dr. John Toussaint, who was the CEO at that health system.
Mhm.
Kim Barnes was at, where John had a board member take him to a snowblower factory in Wisconsin. Aaron's
Mhm.
Dan Aaron's, I think, was on his board, and John reacted to that moment with the humility to say, I'm paraphrasing him, that they treated those snowblowers better than we treated our patients when it came to flow. And he made the choice to be inspired by that instead of being dismissive, which is, I think maybe that's a way of testing whether that humility is there or not. How do you react to a situation where you learn you're not the best in the world?
Yeah, that sometimes people got to see it, right?
Mhm.
They just got to go see it and talk to their peers because they may be able to answer their questions, certainly better than a consultant or a book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, get that CEO to their peers or to other companies, and that can really engage them in
Mhm.
the process. I have not seen that go backwards. Like
Yeah.
it's not threatening situation. They're going into another company, and in every case, I've seen something
Mm.
positive come out of that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think one of the other habits that's interesting, or it gets rewarded and
Mhm.
it's really a habit, is knowing things versus discovering things, or
Mhm.
demanding answers quickly as opposed to
Mhm.
encouraging people to learn through
Mhm.
experimentation and
Mhm.
iteration. How do you help leaders, first off, see that gap or that possibility? How do you help them make that shift?
And I haven't done this in all cases, but it's that guided discovery process
Mhm.
where Nicole came out and turned his head, right? He didn't
Yeah.
have to tell me that I had to figure that out. I mean, by the way, when I learned that Kanban system, It was from a gentleman, Bob Pentland, who worked with the Moffett Associates. And when we figured out how to do a Kanban system, a replenishment system, he didn't give us any formulas. He said, "There's no formulas for this." He's like, you got to know your usage and how long it takes to replenish your container quantity and go figure it out. And we kind of came up with something. He said, "Well, go simulate it on the orders for the last month." Oh,
Busted.
that didn't work. And we changed it. And we came out of that with like a really good understanding of how to do that. Not some formula or in a book. So guided discovery,
Mhm.
it's a process that I use quite a bit. And again, I haven't always done a good job with it, but those leaders learn
Mm.
from me because they see me modeling guided discovery, and then they have gone out and said, "Well, I don't have to tell them. I'm going to let them figure it out." And then certainly in this workshop process where, we pull people together to go through a process where, they're starting with understanding the current state, documenting the root cause. Then they're going out and trying things, right? It's not me as a facilitator telling them the solution. They're coming up with it. And they'll be like, "Should we do this?" I'll be like, "I don't know. Go try it." Right. Or,
Right.
they can learn at the team level too that, they have to try things, they have to experiment. And I think some of the best learning has come from this guided discovery process.
No, when you said a minute ago, you didn't always do that well. Is that a matter of falling back into the telling habit and realizing, "Oops, I did that," or what else can go wrong when trying to facilitate that approach?
Yes. Guided discovery takes a certain amount of patience
Mm.
with your organization to be able to try, to make mistakes, to fail. And, I'm like, "Well, wait a minute. I've already done that. I've already tried a bunch of things and failed, and I figured it out now. So this is the way you could do that because
Yeah.
I've gone through that." So lack of patience, right? I
Yeah,
felt
it sounds
dumped
efficient.
over.
It sounds efficient. Like, "Hey, you should learn from my mistake."
Yeah. Or having literally worked with around 1,000 teams over my career, I've got a lot of kind of knowledge how other teams have solved this problem. So it's sometimes quick for me to, not have patience, go, "Well, here's how another team solved it."
Yeah.
And it might be the right thing. And then I go, "Oh, great." But you're not getting the learning
Mhm.
you are. Some people have to struggle and figure it out. And you may not get the success with implementation because, "Oh, this guy said the other person solved it. This other team solved it this way. Well, we must be able to do that." They haven't really internalized that that's the best way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been impatient at times and wanted to
Mhm.
share other people's success,
Yeah.
able to, speed along the, improvement as opposed to, people figuring it out. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes people, you can go too far, right? I mean, people are, if they're truly struggling, and I've probably made that mistake too, where they struggle so far that they get fed up, where I could have, with some
Totally.
facilitation, maybe have got them back on track. So
Mhm.
there's a middle ground that,
Right.
you live in, it works really well. And I've hit both ends, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think, with a lot of things, involved with lean, finding the balance point in the middle. I've seen people get frustrated by, this leading by asking questions approach, or I've seen people literally get frustrated and say, "Would you just tell me what to do?" And, that's, but I think, I think some of that is, people have been conditioned that, if you try something and you're wrong, you get punished. If you speak up with an idea that doesn't work, you get punished. So in a way, it's safer to fall back into that "just tell me what to do, boss" kind of mode. Uh,
Uh, yeah. And I have one team that I'm working with that, is military, and uh, they're, familiar with centralized command and decentralized control. And as a leader, I'm not about centralized command.
right.
And that causes a lot of frustrations. I mean, they're used to on the control side having a lot of leeway and not clear guidelines and ambiguity. But man, they're used to on that command side that it be centralized, be clear and direct. So when I live in that boss mode in for those type of individuals, and I'm not that's not my leadership style, it does cause some significant friction and frustration.
I think there's sometimes discomfort, like thinking about strategy
Mhm,
deployment,
mhm,
is you write about
mhm,
people are used to being told what the strategy is and
mhm,
maybe go figure out how to execute it. Sounds like what you're describing with centralized
mhm,
command,
mhm,
decentralized
mhm.
control. What are some thoughts on helping people get comfortable with playing catch ball, with pushing back, with less fear? Because a lot of organizations, it's so ingrained. Well, if the boss tells you this is the direction, you say, "Aye, aye, captain," and move instead of the boss saying, "Well, what's your input on this?" Help people move beyond saying, "That's great." And actually, we can't play catch ball if someone's not willing, doesn't feel safe to throw the ball back.
Well, certainly in my role as a senior executive, and I run a number of companies, that's about having the right people in place and then having the right conversations to understand, their role with, what you mentioned the catch ball process where, you're going back and forth. So, it's a little easier from a CEO standpoint. From the consulting standpoint, it's much more difficult. And it's, I mean, it's just a matter of coaching and mentorship to help people understand that, they don't have to make all the decisions. They don't have to say anything. That if they have an objective that maybe the senior teams come up with and they've passed it down to say one of the, all the plant managers, and they it's going to be better for them to come back to you with how they're going to meet that top line objective that's been set than you saying, here's the top line objective and here's your portion of it, how you're having to do it. So it's just a coaching environment where give this a try and you might be surprised that, you're going to get what you accomplished by giving them the opportunity to tell you how they're going to do it rather than you telling them how to do it. Now, and it's just a coaching relationship.
All right. Well, John, maybe one more question before we wrap up.
Mhm, mhm.
John Rizzo has been our guest. Again, the book, and look in the show notes for more information. The book is Creating Value, Empowering People. The first words on the cover of the book, empowering people for sustainable success that benefits employees, customers, and owners, listed in that order, which I think is great. So, think about, the writing process. What's the
Mhm.
best thing that you learned along the way? Like, I think as authors, we have the idea of what we're going to write, and then it hopefully evolves as we go and we learn things. What's the best thing you learned, either about all of this topic or writing?
I I wish I had learned how to use commas and adjectives. But I had a lot to say and not a lot of experience with actually writing. I think if I had participated in some workshops on writing,
Mhm.
obviously Tom helped me enormously.
Yeah,
That
it's
would have
Tom
been
Ehrenfeld again for
yeah,
those
yeah.
listening.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Helped me and educated me. But I think, if I had attended some workshops, I might have done a better job of a process. Let's come up with a premise. Let's come up with an outline. Let's build it out from there. I started with, a couple hundred pages of stories,
Yeah.
right? So I would have gone through it a little differently. I'm actually working on book two, which
Oh,
is a
great.
companion book, and it's
Mhm.
going much smoother because I've kind of learned the process. What I'm actually writing a business novel, um, in the spirit of the goal, and
Mhm.
I'm sure you're aware of a number of other businesses. So
Yeah.
it's a business novel about I'm really the main character about my experiences, and all the principles are from the uh, from the first book, Creating Value. But I'm also tying back today's management theory to the original thought leaders in management. So I go back to Follett, I go back to Taylor, I go
Mhm.
back to Deming,
Yeah.
and I draw the principles of today going back. So anyway, book 2 is in the
Yeah.
works, and it's just gone a lot smoother because I know well, I guess I just thought of this. I mean, we talk about process in the business system, right? There's a process for writing. I didn't know that process. I
Yeah.
kind of just come at it. I wish I had learned that process. It would have gone smoother, but it was tremendously enjoyable to do. And
Excellent.
it's inspired me for this book too.
Well, that's great. And Tom is a big help. And, having an editor is so helpful as a partner in that process. So I would love to have you back someday, John, to talk about that second book. I think that would be fun to dig into that, talk about what you've learned and experienced related to Deming. He's, a hero of mine and a lot of people listening. John, thank you so much for taking time out of what's truly a busy schedule. Thanks for being on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course.